If you sat through the 4:45 presentation, you're welcome to sit through it again. If you don't want to sit through it again, there will be some staff out in the entry area to answer questions. And it looks like we're going to run into the same problem that we're cutting in and out, but we'll do the best we can. All right. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. If you are here to hear about the I-90 exit 32 to 40 corridor study and design project, you're in the right place. If not, if you want to get up and leave, that's fine. I won't hurt my feelings. But we're going to talk about this project. This is our second public meeting. We held one almost exactly a year ago, December 20th, right here in the same location, where we were in much more preliminary stages. We were just talking about the project and we were trying to understand and identify all the issues and problems within the corridor. Tonight you're going to see that we've done some work. As we go through our agenda, we'll take care of a little bit of housekeeping. I'll re-review what the project needs and the project goals are. So why is there a project? What do we want to accomplish? We'll look at concept development. A number of concepts, just ideas of what could be done in the corridor to address the issues and the deficiencies were developed. Some of them were dismissed. Some are going to be studied in more detail. We'll talk about environmental concerns because one of our responsibilities is to not only look at costs and construction and everything else, but it's also to consider the environmental impacts in that corridor that anything will harm. We'll look at the alternative evaluation, how we plan to make a decision on the final preferred alternates, and then next steps in how do you stay involved in the project. First though, we'll do a little housekeeping. If, God forbid, something were to happen, exits right here in the front, and there's two in the back, so keep those in mind. If you haven't had coffee, water, cookies, that's going to be outside after the presentation. Please help yourself. If you haven't signed in, please make sure you sign in so we know who's here. Three stakeholders are the key agencies working on this project in this corridor. The South Dakota Department of Transportation, that's my client, that's the agency that hired us to do this work, but they're working in close concert with the Federal Highway Administration and staff from Meade County. Since I already mentioned that the DOT has hired us to work on this project, there are 4 folks tonight from my firm here to answer your questions and talk about the project. My name is Dale Grove. I'm the project manager on this project. Over by the easel is Teresa Moss. Teresa is our lead environmental staff. She'll be conducting the environmental studies and making sure that we're talking about all the right things and identifying what impacts there might be. Aaron Cook is next to Teresa. Aaron's my assistant project manager. Just helps me keep this project rolling, is moving ahead. And then just outside is Peggy Harder. Peggy is leading the Interstate Modification Justification Reports. It's a mouthful, we just call them IMJRs. But anytime you do changes to an interstate system, you have to do an IMJR to get it approved, and Peggy will be leading that for us. So why do we have a project? What is the need that's driving this project? Replacing the eastbound lanes. The DOT had identified that the eastbound lanes pavement was in deteriorating condition, and ultimately sometime in the near future was going to need to be replaced. So they said, with that, let's take a look at what else is going on in the corridor. We identified that drainage structures in the corridor are nearing the end of their useful life. Some of those bridges at exits 34 and 37 are also nearing the end of their useful life, so they would ultimately need to be replaced. Interchanges don't meet design standards. Once upon a time they did meet design standards when they were first built, but those standards have changed, and as they stand today, they do not meet the current design standards. Then finally, there are some queuing issues at Tilford with the weight of motion and the trucks being pulling off to get away. Sometimes those queues back up onto the interstate. That's a huge safety concern. So we wanted to make sure that we're addressing that as well. So what are the goals? Those are some of the needs we'd identified very early on. What are the goals for the project? The first is to identify and analyze potential improvements. That includes finding all of those issues in the corridor, finding all those deficiencies in the corridor, and bringing them to the study advisory team, which is made up of the DOT, Meade County, Federal Highway Administration, and saying, here's what we found, how do we want to address these problems? The second is then to identify and develop feasible construction projects within the corridor. We identify all the problems, the issues, the deficiencies. How do we put them together to make logical construction projects to minimize costs, to minimize impacts to the traveling public? And then finally, put together those final design plans so construction can eventually happen. I mentioned that we're going to look at some concepts in a little bit, but I will tell you first how those concepts were developed. After we were hired and brought on, we were told and tasked to identify the issues and the deficiencies in the corridor. So that includes a wide range of studies, everything from snow drifting issues to bridge structural issues to replacing the pavement. We did that. We developed a list. We developed well over 24 known issues within the corridor. And in May of 2018, we brought it to the study advisory team and said, here's what we found. Animal crashes, like I said, snow drifting, substandard vertical clearances, substandard curves, all of these things. And we had a conversation with the study advisory team over a 2-day workshop that said, here's what we think are important, here are the things that really need to be addressed. And we started talking about how could we put these things together. Using the direction they gave us out of that workshop, we went back to our offices and spent about 4 months developing a wide range of concepts. And we'll see those here just very shortly. Some of those concepts then, or all of those concepts were brought back to the study advisory team in late September of this year. We talked about the concepts, what was good ideas, what maybe wasn't such a good idea, and you'll see some of those concepts post that workshop have been dismissed, largely because they're either too costly or they have too much environmental impact. So looking at those, we said, nope, that is just too much. It's off the table today, leaving us with 3 concepts at exits 34 and 37 that we're going to study in much more detail. Finally, out of that workshop we had in late September, looking at the issues, looking at what's going on, study advisory team said it seems to make the most sense to have 2 projects in the corridor. First, you'll see exit 37. It'll run from exit 37 to exit 40. The construction will start in 2022. The second one will be from exit 37 to exit 32 towards Sturgis, and that one is targeted to start in 2024. So, exit 34. Here are some of the concepts that we discussed. You all know that there's a steep hill off to the northeast of the interstate. Some of the reasons that some of these were dismissed was impacts to that hill, a lot of excavation, high costs, or some of them were dismissed for operational issues. But one of the ones we took a look at is what we call an offset single point interchange. After considering this one, study advisory team said, nope, this one's done. Let's forget about it. Another option is the folded diamond, right there. An interchange you've seen in a lot of different places. It does well in a lot of different places, but it does not do well here. This one is off the table. Another one off the table is the shifted standard diamond. Again, the impacts were just too significant, so this was dismissed already. A westbound button hook configuration is off the table for the same reasons as the other ones. And then a partial folded diamond, same thing. You see how far up the hill that moves. The impacts would have simply been too great. And the last one we dismissed at exit 34 was called a trumpet interchange, and again, that one specifically, I think, with operational issues was the reason it was dismissed. So those are no longer under consideration. What is under consideration? We have 3 concepts that we're going to be doing more analysis on right now, moving ahead. The first one is between the Black Hills National Cemetery that you'll see on the bottom right-hand side of the screen when the screen comes back, and Sturgis. It's a roundabout interchange where we're able to compress the ramp spacing by using roundabouts. That's the thought at this point. You can see the roads in light blue that would need to be built, red. This concept was deemed as feasible, at least at the early stages, so it'll be carried into further analysis, studied in the environmental document that Teresa will be working on. The second one, again, in about the same location, is the modified folded diamond. The study advisory team took a look at this and said this one seems reasonable at face value, so let's look at this one in more detail as well. The third one jumps to the other side of the Black Hills National Cemetery, up near Bloxburg, puts an interchange between the cemetery and a lot of the RV parks and residential houses. This one has a roundabout on the northeast side of the interstate. That allows us to keep things a little more compressed and keep from migrating too far into that hillside and creating bigger issues. So those three concepts for exit 34 are what we're proposing to study in more detail moving ahead. Now, if you look at the first two options I showed you, I mentioned they're between the cemetery and Sturgis, and you see this line coming down and just stopping. That road eventually is going to have to provide an access to everybody who lives, works over here. So we developed some local road options that would connect that interchange with those businesses and residences further south. Three options have been identified. One just hits the property that's going to be acquired by the Black Hills National Cemetery, so there are some impacts there. The second one moves us a little further away, and the third one really moves us far away, where we actually start having some potential impacts to the Black Hills National Forest. At exit 37, we also have three concepts that at this point are proposed for further study. The first one rebuilds the existing interchange very much like it is today. You see the ramps get pushed out, that helps us meet those design standards, but the skew on the bridge and everything else stays largely the same. The second concept bends the road on the west side of the interstate to allow us to put a bridge across the interstate perpendicular to the travel lanes. That allows us a couple different things. It helps us keep traffic moving while the new bridge is being constructed, and it minimizes the length of that bridge to help us reduce costs. So that option will be considered in more detail. And then the third one kind of plays off that. It does that same loop to give us a bridge that is perpendicular to the main line, but it also realigns some of the main lines. So that is the third option at exit 37 that will be considered. At exit 40, there's really not much going on, but to meet design standards, we're going to rebuild the two ramps on the Sturgis side of the interchange, simply to get those design standards met for safety reasons. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa, who, like I mentioned, is leading the environmental studies, and she'll give you a highlight of the environmental concerns in the corridor.
So as Dale mentioned, as part of the corridor study, we looked at the environmental resources and tried to document those and learn about those. The ones that stood out to us as we started reviewing them were, first of all, the water resources. We looked at the wetlands along the corridor, floodplains, and then also surface waters, which in this case is mostly streams. We looked at animal and bird migrations. There are elk herds that cross the corridor. Threatened and endangered species are always something to consider if you're impacting their habitat. Cultural resources. Certain parts of the corridor have several archaeological sites that have been documented or recommended. And then parks and recreational facilities, anytime you're impacting public lands with a transportation project and there's a federal element, there can be additional coordination that needs to happen. And then noise and visual, just because of the land use along the corridor, we have campgrounds, we have a cemetery, we have areas that might be sensitive to increases in noise. So as part of our learning about the corridor, we talked with several agencies, federal, state, local agencies. We wanted to find out, do we have the resources shown correctly? Do we understand how they're used? And that would help us then understand the value and what our impacts might be to these. So we will continue to work with all the agencies shown here as we move forward. Some of the studies that we did a wetland delineation. We started with a desktop delineation, looked at maps, looked at aerials, looked at other delineations that were done and tried to map what we thought was out there. And then we had a crew go out and they actually field delineated the corridor. So you'll see that in just a minute. And then we also looked at the FEMA floodplain maps to see if we were within any floodplains or floodways along the corridor. We also looked at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the South Dakota Game Fish and Parks, their databases to see if we could gather more information on the threatened and endangered wildlife. And then lastly, we did a Class 1 survey for cultural resources. We did a windshield survey, we did a record search through SHPO, and then the BLM actually provided us with a lot of good data. So that's all been wrapped up into a Class 1 survey report, which we've used to define some areas of avoidance. So as Dale mentioned, we looked at the whole corridor, 32 to 40, but now we're going to focus on 34 and 37 to 40 as projects that are moving forward. So this is to start with exit 34 for the water resources. There's 3 delineated wetland areas that are shown with the green arrows, and then there's 2 stream crossings shown with the blue arrows. And as Dale mentioned also, there's 2 projects that shift, or 2 alternatives that shift to the north and one that shifts to the south. The 2 alternatives that shift to the north, both will impact 2 streams, but they have either no wetland impacts or very minor wetland impacts, under a 1/10 of an acre. As we shift south, we get away from the stream crossings, but then we end up with larger wetland impacts, somewhere near an acre at this point, although we'll be able to pull that in as we define our alternative better. Remember where this goes? I think it's public lands. So public lands along the corridor include, all of this green is the Bureau of Land Management. They use it for recreational uses. This is the Black Hills National Cemetery. They're also annexing this from the BLM, so they will be expanding. So those are 2 federal properties that we'll have to be aware of. There's also a U.S. federal forest land right on the east-west side of the Black Hills National Cemetery. And then this is Centennial Trail. That is a state trail, so we'll be cognizant of anything that moves that, which both of these 2 alternatives to the north are likely to have an effect on that trail. And then there's state and local trails that connect to Centennial Trail also that we need to be aware of. So again, as we shift south, we get out of those areas a little bit. We do nip the bottom of the Bureau of Land Management property, but that tends to be better because you're not right in the heart of it. You're actually, your impacts are kind of shifted to one side, so that may be more beneficial. So this is what came out of our Class 1 review that we did. These are areas of concern or areas of avoidance. Those are the salmon-colored boxes that you see there. This larger gray shape is the Fort Meade Archaeological Site. So the salmon boxes and this gray area are just larger areas that have specific sites located within them. We like to keep it just kind of general as we're going through the planning process. And then the Fort Meade Historic District is green line, but we are outside of that with all of our options. So again, you can see that the 2 options to the north are well within that avoidance area. And as Dale said, we also have to consider any impact from these local connecting roads if we're looking at those alternatives to the north, because those are the alternatives that require that road. If you do the alternative that shifts to the south, you no longer need that road. So we have to add those impacts on together. So exit 37, we have far less impacts just because we're moving away from the resources, but also the footprint is closer to what it is now. We're not expanding as much into a new area as we were at 34. So we do have 2 stream crossings. Both of those stream crossings are affected by all 3 alternatives. There's really no difference there. The wetlands are different. We do have 3 wetland complexes. We have 2 vegetated smaller wetland complexes and then this large forested wetland complex. The alternative, I think it's 37-2, is the one that skews the bridge. That's actually our most favorable regarding wetlands because it shifts the bridge so that these ramps can stay closer, tighter to where they are now. So that pulls us out of that wetland. But then 34-3, I believe, is the one that, 34-3 is the one that actually moves the main line. And that's the most impactful. we actually end up hitting these vegetated wetlands, and then we hit the forested wetlands as well. Public lands, we have very few as we shift down to exit 37. We have chat lands, they're actually privately owned, so there's just some extra coordination with the landowners there. And then cultural resources, this is our avoidance area there, which you can see is well outside of any of our limits. So I'll leave it to Dale to explain how that all fits into the bigger picture.
All right, thanks, Teresa. As you're getting more information, you're seeing that development transportation projects really ends up being a balancing act. Costs, impacts, safety, environmental issues. We have to find the alternative that best balances all of those, and to accomplish that, we've got to identify some criteria that we're going to judge these concepts against. And we've done that. If you picked up a comment form and information at the desk where you signed in, you'll see the issues that we're planning to use to address which of these concepts are the preferred alternates. We've also prioritized them, the ones that we thought were the most important to the ones that are still important but just not as important. So in the order of priority, we're saying safety is the #1 concern of these projects. Geometric needs, environmental impacts, costs, traffic and levels of service, how well it operates. Constructability issues, impacts to access for current and future development, right-of-way impacts, flexibility with future development, bicycle enhancements, and utility impacts are the criteria that we've identified from most important to least important. One of the reasons I'm thrilled that we've had so many people come out tonight to talk to us is we want to get your opinions. Are those the right criteria? Are they in the right order? Is there something we didn't think of, or is there something you think we shouldn't even be bothered with? One of the reasons I'm glad that you are here tonight is to let us know what you think about those criteria and the system we're going to use to evaluate the content here this year. So very soon. We're wrapping that up. In spring, we'll identify the construction projects, some of the details of those projects and what they will contain. That doesn't mean that we're going to have anything that we know we're going to build for sure yet, but it knows that we'll know that we're going to replace exit 37. We just don't know which option we'll use. Submit interchange, modification, justification reports. Those IMJRs, as I mentioned, need to be approved by the Federal Highway Administration since the interstate is their system. We're looking at those being done in summer of 19. And then the environmental studies that Teresa will be doing, we're hoping to have the first one completed in the fall of 19, which will allow us ultimately to choose what is going to get built. Now with that, what are the next steps? What's going to happen after tonight? The corridor study that we've been doing and identifying those issues and developing concepts scheduled to enable us to have a preferred alternate and go into the preparation of the final design plans so we can ultimately have those done in the fall of 2021 and see that first construction project in 2022. At this point, the study advisory team, again, has recommended that any construction from exit 37 to exit 40 be the first project that moves ahead, so that would be done in 2022. And then the projects or any work done between exit 37 and exit 32, Sturgis, would be the second project to come through the corridor, probably starting in 2024. That's our target. So, again, we're thrilled that you're here. What we want you to tell us is, in addition to those criteria that I identified, what's your favorite option? Why is it your favorite option? What do you not like? Tell us why you don't like it. Do you have comments? Do you have concerns? Do you have ideas? Something maybe we haven't thought about. We want to hear all of those things. Your comments are valuable to us, and I can tell you that your comments will be seriously considered, because part of the process we have to go through with environmental documents is to identify the comments that we've received and show that we've addressed them. Tonight, if you have comments, you can give them to us in a written format. There's plenty of forms on that desk. You can give us an oral comment if you'd like. If you'd rather sit down someplace and just talk, we'll take that as well. Once you leave, doesn't mean that that's the end of your chance to provide comments. So after tonight, you can still provide written comments. Take those with you, write down your comment, fold it up, put a stamp on it, send it. It comes to me. It gets just as much weight as any comment I get tonight. You can go to our website and provide comments, www.I-90exit32to40.com. That gives you project information and gives you an opportunity to submit comments. Then finally, if you have our contact information, call us, email us, send us a letter, anything. We want to hear your comments. Staying involved past tonight again, we're looking to have our next public meeting sometime in the summer of 2019. It will be advertised. Notices will be sent out again to make sure we let everybody know that what's going on, and you can come and talk to us again. We'd love to see you. We're thinking the landowner meetings will start in the fall of 2019 because we'll have a pretty good idea of what's going to be getting built. So as you start to talk to landowners about the projects, if you're interested in getting on the state's listserv site to receive email updates on the project, there's a website you can go to get on that. When I jump past the screen, if you want to get it, come on down. I'll go back to this slide and we can write it down for you. And then finally, again, our project website, www.I-90exit32to40.com. Go there. There's a lot of information and a chance to give us comments. With that, thank you again for coming tonight. I'm glad it's a nice night. I think last year was a little wintry, but we're glad you're here. If you look for anybody wearing a badge, not only the Stantec staff identified, but there are some folks from the DOT and the county and the Fed here as well. If you have questions, please come down, ask us the questions. We're happy to answer them for you. And again, most importantly, please make sure you drive home safely. We want everybody to make it home and have a very Merry Christmas. So, thank you for coming, and come on down and ask us questions.